Um, he says that explanations and interpretations are less reliable than actual feeling and experiencing. People put their stories and their feelings through filters, and people change them to somehow kind of make up their world so that it fits in their worldview. And those are not always accurate. Sometimes people make adjustments or might not necessarily see something. So he's more about experiencing things. So when you say, "Tell me about something," it's kind of inherently flawed. But when you can show someone something, so example, show me your anger. What does anger look like? How do you express it? It's kind of right there in your face for him. So this is a very interesting gentleman who kind of pushed, and all Gestalt therapists are people that push the body to kind of show how we're feeling. There's a lot of movement exercises, and there's a lot of body exercises to kind of describe what might be going on internally within us. We are looking for a difference of perception between the therapist and the client. Oftentimes, we might point out strengths that they might not see, for example, and we're really helping them try to make informed choices for themselves. We as therapists need to be present, and what we're trying to do is create a setting that kind of offers us an opportunity to become more aware. He's famous for saying, the more we work at becoming what we are not, the more we remain the same. I'll repeat that. The more we work at becoming what we are not, the more we remain the same. So he says, for example, people try too hard to become what they want, and in doing so, they remain the same. It's in being yourself, your genuine self, that you will eventually accomplish your kind of life goals. So if you're like trying really hard to be a successful businessman, whatever that means, because you're trying, you're kind of not really authentic. And in doing so, you're kind of remaining yourself. You're not really growing. You might be able to fool a few people, but you're not really becoming that. And it's referred to kind of as the paradoxical theory of change. We change when we become aware of what we are, opposed to trying to become what we are not. Again, an awareness of who we are currently will help us get to where we want to be. Not by trying to become something, not by like enacting false ideas that aren't really genuine just because we think that that's what will help us become something. So he's one to kind of express being instead of should being. Everyone has an idea of what they should be in order to be a good mother, or what they should be in order to be a good grad student. But if you just kind of do what's natural to you, you will gain an awareness of where you are in this process, and you will see the light. You will know the road, and you will kind of know where to go from there, and you would just kind of follow the steps from there. Again, he talks about that holism, the Gestalt itself, and he says that human beings strive for a completion of the Gestalt. Having all those components kind of come together nice and neat into the Gestalt, the whole, is something that we all want to do. We all want to kind of unify ourselves. And again, the whole is different from the sum of the parts. And he says, there's no value to certain aspects of a person. When I say smart, and I say nature-loving, and I say devoted, these are small parts of an individual. Now, if I told you that smart, devoted, and nature-loving were components of someone like the Unabomber, you might not, originally think that, because you don't see the whole. So he disregards these small parts, and he's more interested in the whole itself. The second thing he talks about is field theory. Again, organisms must be seen within their environment. they talk about the interrelational aspects of things and how they're always kind of in flux. And the field that he's referring to in this field theory is really the whole environment. It's the entire situation. It's the entire everything. It's the client, it's the therapist, it's the room, it's the chair in the room, it's the windows and the activity that's going outside, it's the receptionist who knocks on the door and interrupts you. All these things are the field. And again, all these things are interacting and things are going on. All of a sudden you're talking, all of a sudden you're talking, and then there's the phone ring, right? The phone rings, and these are all within the field. And again, he tries to not separate these things. These are all part of the whole, the gestalt of the field. And again, everything's within itself. He then talks about something he refers to as figure formation process. This is describing how the client organizes things moment to moment, how the environment itself kind of affects the field, how the environment itself affects the scene, and how things move from the foreground to the background. You might be paying attention to the client, and that's what everyone's focusing on, or at least that's what the client's focusing on, and then all of a sudden that phone rings. And then all of a sudden that phone that was not really being paid attention to at all is now ringing, and everyone's paying attention to the ringing. Or all of a sudden an explosion goes on outside and you can see the smoke rising from the building across the way. You weren't even looking at the building before, but now all eyes are on that. So this happens in life all the time. Things come from the background into the foreground, and then things fall back into the background again. This is a process that is going on all the time, and we're not necessarily always aware of that. And he talks about how things go back and forth within these fields. It's called the figure formation process. He says that organisms have this capacity for self-regulation. He said that we want to be balanced, we want to feel that our complete whole, but our needs and our interests sometimes get in the way of those things. That we want to kind of regulate ourselves to help finish unfinished business. I know we talked about that a little bit prior. To destroy fixed gestalts, so a gestalt, a whole, that might not be necessarily working for you. Who you are, everything that you identify with yourself may not make you happy. It may not be enough for you. So what we want to destroy is this world that we've kind of created for ourselves, and possibly create a new one. And we can do that with ourselves. But it is a process, and we need to be aware of a lot of things in order to do so. And again, our goal would be to incorporate more satisfying gestalts, create new wholes, dissolve these old little components of ourselves, and highlight new components of ourselves, new awarenesses to create a new whole. Perhaps we weren't aware of these things about ourselves before, but now we are aware, and now we can create a new us, a new whole. Again, we're more interested in the present. We don't necessarily care about the past so much, or we don't necessarily care about the future. Power is in the present. We are interested in the whats and the hows of how, how we're expressing things and what we're expressing, rather than the whys. We're not really concerned about the root causes necessarily. We're more concerned about how we're expressing things. A lot of that is shown non-verbally. And for example, an exercise would be like, what would you like to say to your father or your grandfather right now, who's passed away? And you kind of say, okay, we'll look at the chair right there and say it. Get it out now. Well, he's not here. Well, I don't care. Say it right now. Get it all out, because that's kind of unfinished business. Let's get it out of our system. Someone would come into your office and say they are experiencing fear. And you would say to them, well, how are you expressing fear? They would say, well, I get afraid when I see blah, 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 blah. And you go, no. How are you expressing fear? And they're like, what? What do you mean? Well, I guess I get, closed up. Or I guess I retreat. Or I guess I'm a little more alert. And these are the kind of things that he's focused on, the hows. Or like, if someone says, they're withdrawing from certain things. Well, how are you withdrawing? Oh, well, I'm not going to certain locations, or I'm avoiding certain phone calls. That would be an example of how people are doing things.